Hello there. Today I'm here to dive into some books about people who are toxic, but they're a little bit silly about it. These people are unhinged, but it doesn't take like a dark tone. There's a sense of humor. It's not necessarily dealing with like really heavy themes, or if it is, it's not dealing with them in a really heavy way. These are the books that we have. Really, what's in common with all of these books is the tone and the fact that you're inhabiting the narrator's head for most of it, and the narrator's head shouldn't be a fun place to be, but kind of is because of the sense of humor in the book. So on the top, we have Nevada by Imogen Binnie. This is about a woman whose life kind of falls apart. She goes on a road trip and she meets a kid and she tries to convince him that he's trans. There's so much more to it than that, but that's how I'm going to sum it up for you. Then we have Cassandra at the Wedding. This is about a woman, a gay woman. I'm partway through, so it does sell itself as a book about a gay woman, but it's very 1960s about it. She goes home for her twin sister's wedding, and she's kind of intent on destroying the wedding, making sure the wedding doesn't happen. Then we have Fake Accounts by Lauren Oyler. This follows a woman who realizes that her boyfriend, she snoops on his phone, she realizes that he's running like a fake conspiracy account on Instagram. And then we have Lucky Night by Eliza Kennedy. This is a new release, and it's about two people having an affair in this like high-rise Manhattan luxury hotel, and they hear this alarm, and they start thinking, is this hotel on fire? And it just kind of spirals from there. I'm going to start out with Lucky Night by Eliza Kennedy, and I will allow myself from the past to tell you about it. I can't really pretend like I filmed this intro ahead of time because I have got a haircut since I recorded the piece about Lucky Night. So sorry that you can't suspend your disbelief. There's no movie magic here. I am filming this after reading almost all of these books. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about Lucky Night by Eliza Kennedy, and I would like to start out with a disclaimer that not only is this an advanced copy, it is also baby's first advanced copy. So while I will do my very best to be as unbiased as a reporter as I possibly can be, I'm probably gonna skew a little bit positive on this because I am very excited and I want to thank Crown Publishing for sending this to me. What the hell? I'm getting free books now. This was fun. It was just kind of like a fun time. It's a book about people having sex, and then there's also tension, and it's like a little bit scary. The basic premise is that these two people who've been having an affair for 6 years, they both have their own respective families. They meet up at a hotel, and then an alarm starts going off, and they're like, "Is this hotel on fire?" And everything kind of just spirals from there. And I'm going to tell you about it a lot more in depth. Okay, spoilers will begin now. Lucky Night opens in a hotel room, this brand new luxury high-rise 41st floor Manhattan hotel room with Jenny and Nick. And they're fucking. They are having sex immediately, like right off the hop. This is a raunchy heterosexual book for sure. They are affair partners and they have been for 6 years, and they're spending their first full night together after both lying to their families. And this full night together that they finally get to have is interrupted by an alarm that they can hear going off somewhere in the distance. Jenny immediately, like instantly, right from the get-go, she's stressed the fuck out because she's a little bit scared of fires. Jenny is an author. She writes YA romance fantasy novels, and she had to research fires for her most recent novel. And she got a little bit too into the depths of it, and it became kind of this anxiety fixation. And now she knows all the places to get fire news. She knows a whole bunch of different, like, fire stories of people dying in fires, and she immediately is scared. But Nick's like, there's nothing to worry about. There's not even an alarm going off anywhere near us. It's just kind of a distant beeping sound. We're fine. Get back into bed. Now, Nick... Oh, Nick. First of all, his name is Nick Holloway, which I feel like is so similar to Nick Carraway that we needed to have something said about that. Hello? Great Gatsby? Nick is awful. He is such a little shithead. He is the most desperate, pathetic, needy, self-centered man of all time. And he's in bed and he's like, I need her to get back into the bed right now because I'm feeling a little bit lonely. Nick, obviously, as someone who is having an affair, centers his desires over anything else. And he's also pretentious, and he also thinks very highly of himself, and he's also someone who takes up all the space in the room. Like, he is interrupting everyone constantly. He thinks that he is the smartest guy here.
He thinks he's the coolest guy here, and he is such an asshole, and he is so incredibly sex driven. And it's interesting because Jenny's perception of him is very different from when we're inside Nick's head. This bounces back and forth really easily between their two perspectives. It's never first person, but we do jump around in their minds. And Nick's head is horrible, and it's suffocating, and it's irritating. And then Jenny is like, he's so gentle. He's so nice to me. I love him so much. And the reason that her mind is so clouded is because Jenny was absolutely in love with Nick a few years ago. She spent about a year being head over heels in love with him. This is not something that he knows, and she forced herself to stop being in love with him. But she also wrote her best-selling books with a mimic of him at the center, and she wrote about love, talking really about him. After a while of hearing this beeping, Jenny's like, why don't we just go? Like, why don't we just like go get a drink? Like, I'm just getting too stressed out. Like, I don't know. I'm not really in the mood to have sex. And he's like, I need your naked body right now. And he, like, while she's talking, he'll just be zoning out and being like, wow, her boobs are great. It does use the word breastily on like page 3, which is tricky. That was tricky. I read that and I thought, I could quit right now. But I'm glad that I didn't, because at the end of the day, this was a fun book. I think that the characters are both quite annoying. Obviously, they're kind of despicable. Like, they're both having affairs. They have been having an affair for 6 years, and they both have children. Like, it's really shitty, but they're despicable in a fun way. I enjoyed reading about how frustrating they were. After a while of back and forth where they both want very different things out of the night, they get an announcement that comes through the alarm, the fire alarm, and the announcement says, firefighters have been dispatched to the 5th floor, but you don't need to worry about it. It seems to be a false alarm. Just stay where you are, because we can't have everybody in the elevators. There's no need to evacuate. No worries whatsoever. Jenny's like, I'm having a fucking panic attack. I'm gonna lose it. Jenny's like, I can't do this anymore. We gotta get out of here. We're gonna die in a fucking fire. They're very high up in this building, to be fair. I can't imagine ever choosing to spend a night on the 45th floor of a 41st, whatever it is, of any building ever. Especially not a brand new one. Jesus. Then they get another announcement through the alarm, and it says, everything's okay. There's no need to worry. The elevators will probably be opened up in like half an hour. And they're like, okay. Jenny's like, okay, we can have sex again. They start, and the whole time, Nick is so annoying and so focused on anal. It's like irritating. And then they get another announcement, and it's like this garbled. There's like static. It's really like hard to understand what's happening, and they can hear like argument, like shouting between two people. And one of them says, "This isn't right. They deserve to know." And then it cuts off, and Jenny's like, oh, we're actually gonna die. She does manage at this point to convince Nick to get the fuck out of this hotel. So they leave, they're heading down the stairs along with a whole bunch of other guests at the hotel. And they do smell smoke. They end up smelling smoke in this stairwell. They get about 10 floors down when a firefighter sends them all back up. He says, this is blocked off. You cannot evacuate right now. Everyone needs to shelter in their rooms. It's under control. The fire is contained, but you cannot be evacuating. You have to stay up there. So they're sent back up. Jenny, of course, is panicking the whole time. She's looking at Twitter. She's looking at Reddit. She's watching the news. It seems that everything is okay. It seems like this is some maybe a suspicious fire, maybe just like a small fire, maybe it's just smoke at this point. It doesn't seem to be that they are in active danger, but there is something going on that is stressing her the fuck out. In this kind of high stress situation, the two of them start bickering. They start bickering about lies that each of them have told to each other. They start begging for confessions from the other and then getting mad when the person tells them the information that they were gunning for. It is very realistic in the way that they're fighting about nothing. They're fighting just to fight. They're fighting because they're stressed out, but it is also a little bit repetitive and a little bit hard to read. Them just like having arguments about absolutely nothing, and like also just lying for no reason, but then also like expecting more from the other person than they're giving to themselves, and expecting your affair partner to be fully honest with you all the time, and then getting mad when you ask them to be honest about something and they reveal that they have previously lied. Like, you're having an affair. Like, be realistic. This arguing does distract them from the situation that is quickly worsening until they're interrupted by a pounding at the door, and they're like, ugh, it's a firefighter. We're about to be evacuated. But they open the door, And the person standing there has actually walked down the hall and is pounding on the other doors in this hallway. And he is a giant, like 6'5", sweating, bald, 300-pound Finnish man in a bathrobe. And he sees their door open and he comes barreling into the room. And he cannot communicate with them whatsoever. He is in a full and total state of panic. Now, he's not actively dangerous to them. He's not a threat, but his anxiety is terrifying. The anxiety of this absolutely giant man is so tense. They manage to communicate a little bit through Google Translate, and he kind of gets his grasp on English back once he calms down a little bit. He says, I'm an engineer. I need to find a floor plan. We need to get the fuck out of here. I tried to evacuate. I went down. The stairway was filled with smoke, and then I realized I didn't have my room card, and I'm locked out of my room. But this is a very serious situation, and we need to get out of here now. I need your phone so I can look up the floor plan. And he does look up the floor plan, and he finds it, and he says, I think that this staircase C, will be safe to evacuate. And Jenny says, okay, we have to go. They wet some towels to breathe through, and he kind of tears through their room, finding a bunch of supplies, trying to prepare themselves to go through what likely will be a lot of smoke, which is very dangerous, of course. And he says, okay, we gotta go. We're getting out of here. This man, Edvin. He goes to leave, and Nick says, Jenny, you're staying here. We're not going. And Jenny says, I need to go. And he manages to convince her to stay with him. But when Edvin goes, he grabs Jenny and tries to pull her out of the room. She does pull away and goes back into the room, but he takes her phone with him. He escapes, and the two of them are now stuck in this room again together. They have some more conversations. A lot of this is them just hashing out some shit between them. They talk about their own relationships with their husbands and wives, and we kind of get a little bit more of Jenny's story. She had started this affair with Nick because she was so touched out by her children. She has 2 little boys, and she felt like she was constantly being treated by her husband and by the boys as mom, as wife, and she wanted to be a woman again, and that's how she felt with Nick. And then Nick, very simplistically, just wanted his youth back. He wanted to feel like a young man with the world ahead of him, and he felt that way with Jenny. Now, this whole time, they're getting a ton of conflicting information about the state of the fire. There's not all that much communication with the fire department, and the hotel is clearly woefully undertrained. They do not have enough staff to deal with this. They're mostly getting all of their information from the news. A news anchor is standing outside. They're reporting on this fire. There's not visible flames, but there is visible smoke billowing out of not the 5th floor, but the 21st floor, which is a hell of a lot closer to them on the 41st floor. Though things with Edvin kind of turned sour, Jenny is concerned about whether or not he's okay. So she is using Nick's phone to call her own phone, and she can't get through to him. And she's like, oh my God, this dude is fucking dead. And then finally, she is able to get through to him. And all he says is, help me, help me, help me. And then all the sound, all the air is sucked out of the room as there is a massive explosion that shakes the entire building. They see on the news as people scream and run away from the building, and the cameras cut out. As it turns out, the fire has made its way up from the 21st floor, up through the electrical wires, and it has exploded a whole bunch of really flammable materials that have been on the 25th floor, which is marked off it's a construction area still. It's a big open space, and there's lots of flammable shit in there. And it has exploded the windows completely out of that floor, which have dropped onto people below. The situation has quickly become incredibly dire. There's now visible flames coming out of the building. There are many confirmed casualties on the ground, and there is a hotel full of people who are completely trapped. In this state of fear, Nick decides, for once in his life, to be sincere. He's not someone who can really handle doing that. He's kind of just a sarcastic asshole. And he admits to Jenny that he has read her books and that he really enjoyed them, which is hard for him to do because he's the worst guy ever. And she is like, I can't believe you've lied to me about this the whole time. She's pissed. And he's like, I'm trying to tell you that I liked the books. Then there's another explosion. The fire has moved even closer to them. The smoke is at this point coming into the room. There's no means of escape, and Jenny admits in this moment, where she has become very calm because she's sure that they're not making it out, she admits to him that she was in love with him. And then he's pissed at her. He's not like, oh, that's sweet, that's nice. He's like, you got to be in love and I didn't. I wasted my whole youth. I was going to be a poet. And then I learned that actually I couldn't just entirely be the kind of poet that I wanted to be. I wanted to study poetry and like fully commit myself to it, but I didn't actually really have anything new to say. I just kind of wanted to study it, and I realized that that's not really like a job path, and then I gave up on all of it. And then Jenny's mad at him for that. She's like, what? Like, what? Why would you just give up if it was something that you loved? Like, there's no reason for that. Again, they're fighting about nothing. They're being frustrating. They're being so toxic. They're picking on every little thing the other one says. It is so annoying and also so juicy. Up until what feels like the very end, the two of them are fighting. And then when they're like fully accepting that this is never going to end well, again, like I said, Jenny is calm and Nick is now the one who is freaking the fuck out. They lie down on the ground beside each other and they just like have a sweet moment where Nick says, tell me about what our life could have been like if we had decided to love each other. Like, you're a storyteller. I want to hear how you would write our life. And they lie there as the smoke pours into the room. And then the very last sentence is there's a pounding at the door. And it's implied that they're going to actually be saved. I think that was a bit of a cheap ending. I think I would have liked it if they had either fully just died in this fucking fire, or if they had gotten out of the fire. I would have been happy with either of those endings. I think that the way this book maintains tension throughout, because throughout the whole book you're thinking, they're fine, they're going to make it. Oh no, they're not. Everything's bad. And then everything's okay, and then everything's bad. It maintains tension through that repetition because it doesn't matter whether or not they make it out. They're fucked either way. Their affairs are going to come to light if they get out of this situation, and that becomes increasingly clear as the situation gets worse and worse. But also, if they don't make it out, they're dead. So it doesn't matter what happens to them. It's going to be fucked. Like, their lives are thrown into chaos no matter what. So though it's not everyone's style, I did like how this book was written. I personally am able to handle not having quotation marks around dialogue, though I do understand why other people can't. I think that it was a good choice for this book. It makes it so that their interiors and their dialogues feel a lot more enmeshed. Like, there's not as much of a strict divide between what is inside their heads and what they're saying, even though they are obviously different. I don't know, it just adds a little something there. I think this is written in a way that is quite choppy. Like, the sentences can be very short, and they are often like really inside these two characters' heads, and these characters like speak in this way or think in this way that feels very breathless and very urgent. So it has a very interesting flow to it. I liked how often in their heads they would start going down a path that they didn't want to go down, start thinking, and then they would think no. And there often wouldn't be punctuation there, and I thought that that was an interesting way to do it. I haven't really seen that done all that well before, and I think it was executed in a way that I enjoyed reading in this book. I liked the distinction between their two interiors, Nick being this like dramatic monologuing kind of thing, which fit with how he views himself, how he views the rest of the world, and with his desire to be a poet. Like, also his desire to be a poet like fits with him being this like pretentious douchebag. And then Jenny's interior is really, really in conflict with herself, which she is also in conflict, the whole time with Nick and with her surroundings and with just like with everything. She's just so conflicted about everything, and her interior reflects that. I did think that they were both super annoying. Nick, obviously, more so. They're both hypocrites with terrible communication skills. There's so much lying and manipulation between the two of them. Again, I love the expectation that the person you're cheating with, who is also cheating, is going to be honest to you, even when you're not honest to them. Like, they're so incredibly hypocritical, and they're so frustrating for it. But the book has like kind of a sense of humor. I think that the humor did sort of fall flat for me. I think this author is quite a bit older than I am, and we just don't have the same sense of humor. But the book is kind of making fun of itself, and it's definitely making fun of its characters. I liked how they were both erratically emotional when they became panicked, and I think that the book made a good choice in making them panicked at different times. I think that made it a lot more readable. If they were both freaking the fuck out and being so incredibly erratic, it would have just kind of been a chaotic mess, and I think it would have really lost the plot. But having them panic at separate times worked really well. And I also think is realistic to like the human experience. I think often someone has to be the level-headed person in a terrifying, urgent situation, and this reflected that. What I didn't love about this book, there were two main things that stood out to me that I kind of hated. Nick's character, I liked how frustrating he was. I love to be frustrated by a character. I thought that it was a really simplistic view of men. I think that it was a view of men that is not necessarily realistic, is maybe like really well represented. It's not like critical of it. I don't think it's an endorsement of the way Nick thinks, but he is this man who is just like fully driven by sex all the time. And I think that his specific motivations around sex felt not very well thought out. And it just kind of at a point felt tired and like annoying to read. Like, okay, Nick is sex driven. Nick obviously thinks that women are beneath him. Give me a little bit more than that. You know what I mean? I wanted a little bit more nuance or a little bit more to think about with Nick's character. He felt very flat. I said there was two things, but I've actually realized that there's three things. And the second one I'm going to tell you is the word fricking is used relentlessly in this book. I honestly think it could have gained like half a star from me. I think fricking in and of itself took away a full half-star rating from this book. That is hard to read, especially if it is used over and over again. The first time I was like, I really hope we're not going to keep doing this thing with using the word fricking. And then we did. And like, it's not afraid to swear. The book does swear. It's supposed to be like a bit of a quirk of Jenny. Let me tell you, every author out there, no matter what you do, no matter how skilled, no matter how talented you are not going to be able to make fricking work as a quirk of your characters. It's not okay. It is so hard to read. It's so cringe. Oh my God. There was a time where it said fricking twice in 2 pages, and I was like, I actually have to put this shit down. The third thing that I really didn't like here is that a few times in this book, there is this idea expressed kind of about society being too woke or like things moving too far ahead of these people. And it is expressed in a way that feels really earnest and feels really realistic and really familiar to me. And it is difficult to read. And knowing that this is written by an author who is about the age of these characters, it did feel like it was coming from a place of sincerity that I didn't really respect. I'm going to read you an example. You can't say spastic anymore. She had no idea until Charles's assistant corrected her one day. It's just, I have a cousin with cerebral palsy, and that word is really triggering. She was mortified. She never wants to be unkind, though compared to some of the things they used to call each other when she was a kid. But of course, times change. For the better, mostly. There's also another thing, I can't remember what the word is, but she's like, that's a word my grandpa used to say, and he was the nicest guy ever. He wouldn't want to offend anybody. It reminds me of kind of like the way my dad talks about this shit, where it's like, you just have totally the wrong conception of what's going on with like the way language changes, and it's hard to watch. And also, like, you're not the person who gets to decide whether or not things are offensive. Get a grip. So that I really hated. I think if you're looking for something a little bit raunchy, this is kind of a mom book, but in a way that like I again think was really fun. If you're looking for something a little bit raunchy, but also with tension and that will keep you reading it. I read this in a day. I found myself very compelled by what was happening. I think that the summary tells you exactly what it's going to be. And that was why I wanted to read the book, because what's happening with the hotel? Is it on fire? It is very tense, and it can be a little bit dark. And that was really fun for me. And I hated the characters, and that was also really fun for me. So I think you should read this. I think you should check it out if it sounds interesting to you. That's my spiel. I am being honest. I promise. I actually did really like this book. Of course, what you read is so based in the context in which you read it. Am I thrilled that I got a free book? Yes, I am thrilled that I got a free book. Was I maybe looking to like this more than I did? Probably. I want to be able to say nice things about it, but I also have given you an honest review of the things that I didn't like about it. I'm just saying, likely, if I had read this in a different context, there would have been other things I noticed that I didn't like, but I had a little bit of a rose-colored glasses situation on. Because, I mean, look at the bookmark they gave me. They gave me a themed bookmark. That's so fun. It was so fun to read a book like first. I don't know, I feel special. And that has definitely added a little bit of bias. But I'm being open about it, so maybe it doesn't count. Is that how this works? Anyway, the next book I'm reading is Nevada by Imogen Binnie. I don't know whether or not this fits the theme. My partner who has read it told me that it does. So I'm not going to take the blame if it doesn't fit the theme of toxic people being a little bit silly about it. I'll get back to you once I'm done with it. We'll see you later.
Hiya, I'm here to talk to you about Nevada by Imogen Binnie. This is the story of a woman. Okay, everyone sells this as like a road trip novel. It's not that, but I think it's better than it would be if it was a road trip novel. In spirit, it's a road trip novel, and she does technically go on a road trip, but that is not really what this book is about. It's about a woman who's been broken up with by her girlfriend and then fired from her job, and her life is just upended. So she's like, I'm just gonna get the fuck out of New York City, and I'm gonna go to the West Coast. And then in Nevada, she meets a boy and she tries to convince him that he is trans. And like, that's the story, and it's awesome. But also I have other things to say about it that's not just praise. I have some complaints. I'm going to tell you everything that happens in it, so if you don't want to know, get out of here for a little bit. So Nevada opens with Maria, our main character, having sex with her girlfriend Steph and faking an orgasm because she can't get it up because she's so disconnected from her body because she's a trans woman. We get some more information about her, about how she's not just disconnected from her body, she's disconnected from like life in general, from her girlfriend, from her job that she's been working at forever and is not like going anywhere. Like, she's not moving up out of this job. We learn about how being trans affects her life, but more than her life, more like her image of herself, her perception of herself, how she thinks about things, like the coping mechanisms that she's developed. And then after quite a bit of just like internal thoughts, which are so interesting, like Imogen Binnie does such a good job making you so interested in a book that has very little plot. Then Steph, Maria's girlfriend, says, hey, I cheated on you with our kind of mutual friend who works with Maria, Kieran. And Maria's like, okay, I'm going to have to like figure that out. And Steph's like, you're not even going to give me a reaction? Like, you are so disconnected from your own emotions. You are just sitting there while I'm telling you that I have cheated on you. And Maria's like, yeah, I'm going to get out of here. She's just at such a remove from herself and so unable to access her own emotions that she cannot show up in her interpersonal relationships. And that is what Steph is trying to show her. Like, I need you to react to this. You should be upset with me. Be something. Have some feeling. Let me in. And Maria does not give it to her. So Maria leaves and she mostly just kind of wanders around New York City on her bike for a while. She stays up really late. She doesn't have a very easy time sleeping. And she's getting pretty drunk. She goes to see her friend for a little bit. She's going to work and kind of just trying to avoid her emotions. When she finally has a conversation with Steph, she learns that, surprise, Steph and Kieran actually didn't cheat with each other. They were just kind of trying to get Maria to open up to Steph, and clearly it hadn't worked. And so now Maria has all of this like manipulation to work through, and she ends up, after sitting down and like dedicating time to think about what the fuck's going on in her relationship, deciding, I can't do this anymore. Like, this relationship is not working for either of us. I like this. I like how both of them are kind of being toxic. Like, obviously, if we're like comparing it, it's worse to pretend that you cheated on someone, but Maria is not perfect here, and the book doesn't treat her like she's perfect. They are like talking past each other. Neither of them are behaving in a way that indicates that they actually like still love the other person. So Maria does decide, I'm going to go break up with Steph. And her whole walk over to the apartment where she's going to have this conversation, she's just like, how am I going to do this? Like, do you start with I'm breaking up with you and then try to have a conversation? Do you have a conversation knowing the whole time you're going to break up with the person? Like, how should this actually go? And she's just like overthinking. She gets there, and before she can get a fucking word in, Steph says, I'm breaking up with you. It's honestly so impressive how Binnie has managed to make this breakup scene kind of funny. Maria is actually kind of excited to be single. This is her first time being single as a woman, and she is kind of thinking about what her life is going to look like as a single woman. She's also slacking the fuck off at work,
And she does end up getting fired for that, which is something that you can see coming miles away. She just like leaves and goes for walks often. And she's like, I'm union, it's fine. After losing her job and her girlfriend, she realizes through a really one-sided conversation with her friend, who she's mostly been ignoring in favor of her relationship, she says that she is emotionally stunted and she needs to just like have this irresponsible, reckless like experience of being a teenager that she never got because she's stuck as like a repressed teenager. She asks to borrow Steph's car just for the night, even though she knows that she's taking it on a cross-country road trip, and then she abandons her best friend Piranha, who has expressed rightful frustration with her in like such a reasonable, clear-headed kind of way, saying like, I'm not mad at you, but I think you should understand that I'm frustrated with the way I'm being treated in this situation. You absolutely disappeared into this relationship, and now you've just come back because you need something from me, and that doesn't work for me, and I'm not super happy about it. But I love you, and I will support you. I'm not going to kick you out onto the street. She's supposed to hang out with Piranha that night. She's staying at Piranha's house, and instead of doing that, she gets out of New York City and she heads west. That's where part 1 ends. Part 2 starts with introducing us to a new character, James. He's freshly 20 years old. He's living in his little podunk Nevada town, working at a Walmart, being a stoner, and having just like no direction in life whatsoever. And he has just gotten into a fight with his girlfriend, Nicole. And he is sitting at home looking at porn and trying not to think about how the only way he can possibly get off is by imagining himself as a girl. Now, I loved James' perspective. I loved his panicked and unending thoughts about whether or not he was trans that were always in the way of like, I'm not trans and here's why. And then his explanations never like necessarily precluded him from being trans. It was just him really not wanting to be. And I thought it was just like such a realistic depiction of someone at the stage in their life of like pure repression and like even sometimes the thought of like, well, maybe I am trans, but I'm not the kind of trans person who's going to transition. There's even an enjambment kind of thing between chapters where he's thinking about it and he's thinking about it, and then the chapter ends, and then it goes, because look, it's not like James doesn't think about whether he's trans too, right? To be totally honest, he thinks about it all the fucking time. Like, it just like keeps going. It's just like this runaway train of his thoughts. We get quite a few chapters of just James, hearing nothing from Maria, who has been our lead character for this entire book. Then we get a chapter from Maria. It's very short, and it just says, when Maria sees James in the Walmart, she thinks, that kid's trans and he doesn't even know it. James sees Maria in the Walmart, and he thinks, oh my God, she's so fucking cool. Like, she's unlike anybody in this small, shitty little town that I've lived in for my entire life. I want to be friends with her. I want to get to know her. And they have like a short conversation, and he's like wanting to give her his number almost. And it's not necessarily in like an attraction way. He does have a girlfriend. It's just like he feels so drawn to her. And he knows that she's trans, but not because she is like not passing as cis. Through the whole book, we have learned that Maria is like perceived by everyone around her to be a woman. No one is expecting to see a trans person. That's what she says. But James is always looking for a trans person, and he sees it in Maria, and he's like trying not to think about whether or not that is why he thinks she's so cool. Maria leaves the Walmart, and then she thinks more about this, and she thinks, maybe I could help this kid. Like, maybe I could help him realize so he doesn't have to have the same experience that I've had. So he can come out earlier. Like, puberty hasn't even come to his house yet. Maybe he could have an easier transition if he had someone to tell him, hey, maybe you're trans. I wish that I had had that. And so she goes back into the Walmart and she says, hey, I don't really know anybody in this town. Do you think you could show me around? And James is so happy, so relieved. And he's like, okay, yeah, fine, whatever, I can show you around. He's like playing it cool. So when James gets off work, the two of them meet up and they go to James' house where they smoke a ton of weed, and Maria gets too stoned to talk about what she wants to talk about with him. She also can't think of how to bring this up, and James is trying to think of how to bring up asking Maria if she's trans. In the morning, they haven't talked about anything. She just falls asleep. But in the morning, he decides to just come out with it. And he says, hey, you're trans, right? And she's thinking about like, how that's so rude. But then she's also thinking like, if being trans was just like a normal thing that was fine and didn't have all of this stigma and discrimination attached to it, that would just be a kind of mildly rude question. And she's like, I know his intention isn't to be rude, but she's also shocked by it because she passes as cis. This isn't a question that she really gets anymore, but they do end up
to start to talk about gender with each other. And it gets quite intense because this is stuff that James has very much made an active effort not to confront in his life, to push aside, to repress. And Maria notices, like, probably I should stop talking about this with him. So instead she says, you want to go to Reno with me? Like, let's just go gamble. And James is like, okay, yeah, I'm sure, whatever. On the way to Reno, they kind of start Maria starts monologuing. She is trying to convince him that he is a trans woman, and he is not really responding to her. It's kind of going back and forth between Maria's monologuing and then James's long-winded thoughts on this. Maria talks a lot about her own experiences with gender and with being trans, and she tries to get James to see who he really is, where James has decided for himself that actually it's just like a kink. Actually, it's just autogynephilia, which is like not a real thing. And when he brings it up with Maria, she like goes absolutely silent. And then she laughs really hard. And then she's like, yeah, James, I know what that is. But actually, that was just made up by like a transphobic man who just wanted to explain like why he finds some trans women attractive and others not attractive. Like, that the dichotomy that he created is not actually a thing. And James is like so frustrated because she's talking to him in a way that it feels like he knows what she's talking about and she's treating it like he has no idea and he's so naive and innocent. James is also projecting a lot into Maria's head, like thinking she probably thinks this. She probably thinks this about me. Things that he kind of believes about himself but doesn't want to think. Like he's like, she probably thinks that I should just break up with my girlfriend and move out of this town and then transition into a woman. So in the end, Maria does not convince him that he's trans, convince him to transition, because it doesn't work like that. And that is what the book is trying to show. Like, that was a really naive idea that she had of what it means to discover your own identity or to accept it. It doesn't mean that someone just comes along and tells you what you are and then you have like an epiphany moment. And it says in the afterword, which I appreciated the afterword in this book so much, that was Binnie's goal. That there's this like kind of self-hatred thing with trans women where they will often be like, I should have transitioned sooner. And she wanted to write a story of like, well, if someone had come to you and said while you were in full-blown repression, hey, you're trans, would you have actually come out sooner? And I mean, this book says no, and I think that it very realistically says no. It does kind of end abruptly. I think that both characters' storylines are a little bit wrapped up. They get to the casino, and James just leaves. They just kind of separate, and James calls his girlfriend to pick him up. It hasn't worked. He has decided not to listen to Maria, and Maria has realized that her idea of what would happen in this conversation with this kid was not like gonna happen ever. Like, that's just not how it works. And I liked the kind of abrupt ending that this book had. I thought the back and forth between Maria and James was really realistic and really fun to read. I liked how Maria sometimes would have like a really coherent argument that would refute everything that James had just said and like address all of his concerns, and then sometimes she wouldn't do any of that. She would just start talking and it would just be like loosely connected to what he had said, not really going up against any of it, just sort of her talking about her own experiences. I think it was realistic to how a conversation like that would actually go. More than anything, this book is an exploration of Maria's character, and I found her to be endlessly interesting. I thought that she was sometimes annoying. I thought that I felt a lot of tenderness towards her. Like, she was very much a complex character that I could not stop reading about. I just wanted to pick this up so much. I found it to be so approachable. A lot of this book is Maria reflecting on how the coping mechanisms that she used to survive have affected her and how she's stuck in these same patterns of repression and being at a remove and ignoring her emotions or not accessing them and keeping people distant from her because of the ways that she needed to survive. I think it was really interesting how introspective she was while still not really letting herself accept that she is capable of harm in her interpersonal relationships. Like, she knew where all of her hurtful behaviors came from, like where they were rooted, and yet she couldn't really accept that they were hurtful, that Steph was experiencing harm because of the way that she was treating her. I just thought that all the characters in this were great. I felt like they were all nuanced and really well conceived.
like I said, I loved Maria. I also hated her. I loved James. I also felt frustrated with him. And I just wanted to know what was happening. I just felt so invested in the minds of these characters. And that is the space that you occupy for almost this entire book. So there's one large thing that I really didn't like about this book. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, I think I'm just being sensitive. But also, I was noticing it a hell of a lot. And then I read the afterword, and I was really relieved to see that Imogen Binnie actually addresses what I was really concerned about, and that was all I wanted. So in this book, there is this misdirected anger towards trans men, and I noticed it again and again and again. I think there were some really important things to say about trans men being like the voice of the trans community, especially at this time when this book was written in like 2008 to 2013. I think like this overbearing nature in queer like spaces of trans men speaking for the trans experience and excluding trans women from that narrative was really important. Also, like the way that trans men are treated as a lot more palatable than trans women by the queer community. I think all of these are really important things to talk about, and I totally understood why they were included. But the problem is that some of these things are not the fault of trans men, and they were always treated like they were. There was a lot of just misdirected anger. Like, for example, Maria talks about how there are these lesbian sex parties in New York City that are no bio cock allowed, which essentially just means no trans women. And Maria says, but trans men are allowed to go with any kind of penises they want. And she directs the anger towards the trans men who are included and not the people who are excluding trans women. The problem with that is, like, obviously it is different, but trans men are only being included because the people making the decisions about who is and isn't included see them as women. And that is not actually the fault of trans men. And I thought that it was bonkers to direct the anger there towards trans men. She also talks about how much trans men get support for like top surgery funds. And again, says it's like moochy, but also is talking about the discrepancy between trans women and financial support from the queer community for bottom surgery funds. And it's like, is it trans men's fault? Like, do you need to direct this anger towards trans men when it's actually like the greater queer community that is treating trans women and their surgery needs as less palatable than trans men? Because I noticed this anger, it also made me notice things that I don't think I would have picked up on otherwise about the distance that was being created between trans men and trans women by Maria. It felt as though in fighting trans men, like overtaking the voice of the trans community, she was trying to separate herself from them as much as she possibly could and really distinguish like the trans woman voice. But that meant that like this distance was created that felt so like this chasm was created that felt unrealistic. Like, for example, the book will often make a point to really specifically say that something is an experience that trans women have, which, to be clear, there are, of course, experiences that are unique to trans women, but it would specifically say a trans woman experience that was absolutely generalizable as just generally a trans experience. And then it would say trans people when referring to what the aforementioned actually specific unique experiences of trans women. And it felt like it was trying to keep trans men out of the conversation. And at times I would be reading this and thinking about these criticisms, and I would think, I mean, this book is detailing the experience of a trans woman. Maybe it's not for trans men. But then sometimes the book would be like actually explicitly addressing trans men, and it felt very strange to have those two things both happening. But my experience of reading this book, it felt like I was reading a book written by someone who didn't really like trans men. And I felt like I was being sensitive for that. I really did, until I read the afterword, where she does address it. And she says, Maria says fucked up things about trans men. And that's because at the time I wrote this, I actually didn't like trans men. I do think it would have been maybe a little bit more cathartic to read that if her reason for not liking trans men was not just like having some bad experiences with trans men. I think it's really unfair to generalize like a really unique, diverse community of people because of a few experiences. And it doesn't seem like Imogen Binnie had really quite done the work to address those generalizations that she was making. But all I really needed was an acknowledgement that that was what was happening and that it wasn't just me being sensitive. So I was so happy to read that. So happy to understand
that it's not just like a me problem, that was what this book was doing. And on this note, I do want to say this book isn't like incredibly harmful or anything like that. I am pulling out basically all of the examples that I noticed. It just did really stand out to me while I was reading it, and I didn't love it. It was sometimes a bit uncomfortable. Other than really just that one thing, this is a fantastic book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think that it was real and it was raw, but it was also funny and casual. I thought it was so approachable with how casual the voice was. Often a casual voice doesn't really work for me. I don't love the overuse of the word like to make it seem so conversational. And for a little bit, I was thinking that that was how I was going to feel about this book, because it definitely does do that. But in comparing it to other books with a casual voice, it does it much better than them. It's just not something that I personally like, but it is executed well. I also liked how it was at the same time heavy and light. I think that it deals with a lot of really heavy topics, but doesn't linger on them, and it doesn't feel like it's trying to wring an emotion out of you. It just kind of presents it neutrally with this light, sarcastic tone. And again, that made it very readable and very easy to approach and very easy to like reflect on how the things that Maria is thinking about also apply to you, or how you feel about them, because it's not like really trying to get something specific out of you. It's very neutral in its presentation. And like I said, I also loved the afterword for this. I think that it gave me so much insight into what the book was doing, and I think that the book did exactly what it was trying to do, and I loved it. And I loved like the explorations of being an old, or like a 30-ish year old trans woman and trying to figure out like who you really are. There's this quote, let me read it. I thought it was so good. Oh my god, I thought it was crazy. I guess the question is, like, how do you transition but then continue to evolve as a person post-transition, when it seems like the only way you got through your transition was to assert loudly, even just to yourself, that you knew who you were and you knew what you wanted and you trusted yourself? That's like mainly the question of this book, and it's just explored so perfectly, so beautifully. This book is incisive, it's insightful, it's searing, it's intelligent. I truly think there's a reason that this is considered like the titan of trans literature that it's considered, and I am very happy to have read it. The next book I'm reading is a book called Fake Accounts, whose author name I can't remember at all. Maybe it's like Lauren Oliver. I just totally made that up though, and I think it's gonna be like a little bit sillier than this, even though this book was laugh out loud funny. I can't remember if I said that, but this book made me laugh. It also made me do like a little kind of thing. It didn't like make me cry. Like it's not trying to wring an emotion out of you, but it is also filled with emotion at the same time. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think the literary quality is going to be quite the same. I think this next book's going to be a little bit sillier, but I'm excited for it nonetheless, and I will come talk to you about it when I'm done with it. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about Fake Accounts by Lauren Oyler. This book would like you to believe that it's about a woman who snoops on her boyfriend's phone and finds out that he runs a conspiracy theorist Instagram account. What this book actually is about is nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing happens in this book, and it's so incredibly dull. I'll tell you about what happens in it, kind of, but there really is not much to relate to you, because this is one of the most boring books I've ever read in my life. But if you're still compelled by it, if it's still on your TBR after that glowing review, skip this part and go to where I talk about my thoughts, which are almost entirely negative. So the book begins with our narrator wanting to break up with her boyfriend, Felix, and convincing herself that she has a reason to do this because he must be cheating on her. So she snoops onto his phone. This is like very premeditated. She's been looking over his shoulder for a long time, seeing how he types in his password, and she's finally cracked it, and she gets a moment. And when she goes onto Instagram, well, first of all, she goes to his messages and she finds nothing, absolutely nothing. It's so mundane. Then she goes onto Instagram, which he always says he's not someone who has social media, and she finds that he runs a relatively popular conspiracy theory account on there. And she's baffled by this, because this is not the kind of person he has shown himself to be to her. And she kind of knows in her heart that he doesn't believe the wild things that he's spouting on here. So this is confusing, but it is also a reason for her to break up with him, which is what she's been looking for. But she doesn't do that immediately. She stays with him for a couple more weeks until she goes to the Women's March, because this is right around the time of Donald Trump's inauguration, the first time. I can't believe I have to fucking say that. She goes to this Women's March, And she keeps getting this phone call from a California number, and Felix, her boyfriend, will not answer her text messages, and she's getting more and more pissed off with him. And then she finally answers this phone call from the California number, and it's his mother, and she's saying Felix died in a bike accident. And she has to enter this like crazy weird state of grief where she's grieving this boyfriend who she actually felt like pretty fucking ambivalent about, and also she doesn't get answers to what was happening with this conspiracy theory Instagram account. She ends up moving to Berlin, which is where the two of them first met. They were both Americans in Berlin, and she just lives here. For most of the book, it's just like the mundane life of like getting a fucking visa in Berlin. And that is it. We are so incredibly in this narrator's head the whole time, and the book is aware of how boring it is, and it is so boring. Nothing happens until the very end when we learn that Felix faked his own death as some sort of artistic statement, and she feels fooled. She feels humiliated. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the whole book. I can't believe the summary is that short for a book that is 275 pages. Like I already said, this is hands down the most boring book I've ever read in my life. I don't know how I could have possibly pushed through this book. Like, I must have been another person. I can't believe how dull it was. It was as if the author thought she had 3 things that happened and she didn't need anything else to fill almost 300 pages. She had the secret, and then the big death, and then the second secret. And she was like, that's it. I just got to kind of like fill in the rest. I think what managed to keep me going through this book is that the characters are incredibly compelling and also very unlikable. And I love an unlikable narrator. And I love an unlikable narrator who's surrounded by other unlikable people. She had this really interesting voice that I think worked well. I do think that this was like sentence level. It was well written. I think the word choices were great. It felt very deliberate in the way that it constructed its sentences, and I think that fit with the narrator's voice. Her voice being this like kind of humorous thing where she was like really condescending and aware of the reader. She was really condescending about like the most mundane things. Like she was acting like she had all these insights that like no one would ever get unless she explained it in like a really dumbed down way kind of. And then it was just like things everyone has thought. Like, she had nothing to say about the things she was talking about, which were mainly social media and online dating. I did kind of enjoy watching the narrator's interactions with other people. In the beginning, she has these subtle and mostly harmless manipulative tendencies. Like, she very clearly lays out how she's acting in response to how people are responding to her. And then as it goes through the book, she starts up with this, like, chronic lying thing where she absolutely compulsively lies to everyone about every aspect of her life. She's living in Berlin. She doesn't know anybody. She's going on all these online dates, and she's just making things up. But she's also making things up to like the woman who she babysits for. And it never really ends up going wrong for her, but it is funny to see, I don't know, how she manages to get into all these lies. And like there's never really all that much anxiety about being found out. Like, she's really confident in her ability to lie to people. I think this character is like horrifically self-aware in a way that feels very real but very ugly, very difficult to look at. She has so many opinions, and all of them feel very shallow, and it feels like that is the point. It's as if she thinks she has really deep opinions and that she has better opinions than everyone around her, and then everyone around her is also very opinionated and also has very shallow opinions. A lot of her ideas about like activism, like when she goes to the Women's March, a lot of it is just vanity. And vanity is a huge theme in this book because this is largely like a social media book and about the attention economy, but also wanting attention online. She goes from wanting attention desperately on social media to then wanting it from men in her life. And it's not like she's like an influencer kind of thing. It's just like she wants like some likes on Twitter. She wants interaction. She's not like posting herself all the time really, but she is addicted to scrolling, as many of us are. But I think because many of us are addicted to scrolling, it feels like this book is trying to be insightful about something that like everybody has insights on, and it really doesn't have much to say. And really the main thing that it has to say is that people are self-centered in the online dating, in social media, in conversations that she has with people. Like that's the way that she's able to like get through all these lies and to just kind of get away with it, because people want to talk about themselves and they don't really care about interrogating her. And if they start to, she can just turn a question around onto them and they'll start talking about themselves. That's like the lesson in this book. People are self-centered. It's nihilistic, it's stupid, it's boring, and I hate it. I don't think it was saying really anything interesting or new, but because it's trying to do this like really topical thing where it's like set in a very specific time and place, and it's about new technologies, it feels like it thinks it's doing something new. I will say I did find the character of Felix to also be kind of fun in a really hateable way. He is he's such a dick. Like, he just thinks so highly of himself, and he keeps himself at such a distance from everybody else, and he in the same way has opinions that he makes out are clever but really have no depth. Like, he has this strong opinion that comes out of her staying with a gay friend that labels are stupid because it indicates to the world that you're so sure of yourself and that you're so rigid in what you think about yourself. Like, he says, I don't have a label. I just haven't had any gay experiences because no good men have come along yet. But that's more of a reflection of the terrible state of men and not actually anything to do with me or my sexuality. And then the narrator says that if pushed by this society that values labels, he would say that he was straight. Because he was. There's also this funny thing with Felix where she talks about how he would keep his eyes open when they made out, and she would say, hey, why are you doing that? Trying to communicate to him that she wanted him to stop. Their communication is horrible, of course. And he would say, I just think it's fake that everybody closes their eyes while they kiss just because that's how they do it in movies. I'm giving you all these complaints about this book, but there are things that were interesting in here. There was characterization that was fun. I think this could have worked really well as a novella if it just cut out all of the fucking fluff that was the majority of this book, because like I'm saying, like, the writing is good structurally, like sentence level, the writing was great. I think that it like drew me in immediately, and I did read the whole thing. It was a very DNFable book, and I did finish it. I also think Felix was interesting. I also think there could have been a really interesting character exploration of this narrator who is so self-centered and talks so much about how she is self-centered and how everyone else around her is self-centered, and then she also at the same time does not have a very strong sense of self. That could have been great. It's just that there are maybe 250 too many pages in this book. It feels at times that this book is trying its hardest to be boring. Like I said, the narrator is aware of a reader. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but she'll mention quite often, this is boring. This thing I'm telling you about is boring. I took too long to explain that. There is almost a full page that's just simply a list of countries. It adds absolutely nothing to the text. It's just dull, brazenly, confidently, boldly boring of a book, which is crazy. Why is that what you want to be? It's blurbed by Zadie Smith on the front, and her blurb says, this novel made me want to retire from contemporary reality. I loved it, but I like to kind of imagine that she was saying this novel made me want to kill myself, because that's how difficult it was to read. I'm not joking. You flip through, okay, you get to page 80 or something like that. Nothing has happened by page 80, right? And then what do you see? Middle. Nothing happens. Nothing is happening. What do you mean nothing happens? And then you're like, okay, well, maybe this will be okay. Like, maybe it's just like a few pages. Like, maybe it's like 20 pages. No, it's most of the book. It's like a 90-page chapter. Nothing happens. Oh my god. I should have given up at that point. I don't know why I pushed through this, because I really got nothing from it. I wanted this to be what it sold itself as. I wanted it to really go into the premise that it told me it was going to go into. I feel like I was kind of lied to. Like, the idea of discovering that your boyfriend has this conspiracy theory Instagram account and it makes absolutely no sense with who he is as a person or who he's shown himself to be. That's awesome. That's not what this book was about. This was trying to be like the great social media novel, and I think it failed miserably. I will end on a positive note about this book. I do like that I didn't know how autobiographical it was. The narrator, like I have said multiple times now, is aware of a reader. There's also this thing where she's aware that her ex-boyfriends are reading this book, but she's mostly addressing when she addresses outward. It's to a reader, and like the boyfriends seem to be like behind her. But that means that there is an awareness that the narrator is writing a book, and sometimes that awareness feels as if it's coming from the author. And I do think that was interesting. And I'm not going to look it up because I don't fucking care and I don't want to think about this book ever again because it was so boring and it's just like not worth my time. But I think that she does a good job of balancing this kind of mystery of, is she writing about herself, or is this fully just the narrator thinking about writing a book? If you can't tell, I would not recommend this. I think that this was a waste of my fucking time. Thank God the writing was good enough. I think there were little tidbits. There were some, I don't know, descriptive words, some sentences in here that were good. I don't think it's poorly written at the lowest level, but I think that, like, overall, this book did not need to be written. It has nothing to say, and it says nothing for 275 pages. And I spent 2 days reading it, and I'll never get those 2 days back. So probably take this off your TBR. Probably don't read this book because, like, it was awful. The next book I'm reading is Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker. I'm about 80 pages in. I might finish this today and then update you later. I am really enjoying it. It's much faster paced. I mean, it's not like a fucking ball rolling down a hill. It's just better than this. This was horrible. So I will update you later with a more positive review, I'm assuming. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about Cassandra at the Wedding, a book whose summary makes it seem a lot more silly and fun than it actually is. I know I told you that the common thread through these books is that they deal with not necessarily heavy themes. Not true of Cassandra at the Wedding whatsoever. The tagline of this book is a gay woman goes home for her twin sister's wedding and she's intent on ruining it. That sounds fun. That sounds, maybe it could be heavy, but it sounds a little bit like the end of the Black Mirror episode Nosedive. I know referencing Black Mirror in 2025 is crazy, but I was thinking that was going to be what was happening here. It's very much not that. And I think largely that's due to the fact that this is not like a typical wedding, like this big extravaganza sort of thing. It's a really, really, really small ceremony that they're planning. And so there's not this social aspect really of ruining the wedding. That was what I was expecting and why I thought that this would fit in a little bit better than it does. But I would like to tell you about this book anyway, because I thought that it was fantastic. It was so, so good. So I'm going to get into the plot right now. So if you want to read this, skip ahead. So this book is split up into 3 sections, and the first one follows Cassandra heading home for her twin sister's wedding. She is a graduate student at Berkeley, working on her thesis, and in the beginning here, it's sort of implying that there's been a kind of falling out between Cassandra and her sister Judith, because there's an extreme closeness when Cassandra thinks about them, in her memories of them, but they aren't living together anymore, and they haven't been living together for 9 months. Now, Cassandra is a really interesting character that is very hard to describe. It almost feels, particularly in this beginning part when she's alone in the car, just heading back to her home, that she does not have access to or curiosity about her own motivations. She does really strange things to deal with emotions that she can't actually deal with, that she doesn't have the tools to deal with. Like heading home for her sister's wedding, her sister marrying this man that Cassandra has never met and didn't know anything about is so overwhelming to her. She gets out of the car on the side of the road and sticks her head under a water pump. Or once she's back in her family's home, she squeezes an ice cube in her hand just to deal with, to have some sort of like sensory experience other than the internal emotions that are too big for her to face head on. She's also a really paranoid and a really sarcastic character, but not in a way that makes her unlikable. I think that this book makes you pity Cassandra a little bit, but she also she has like a personality that is very strong, sometimes too strong, but strong enough that you feel a lot of warmth towards her and you understand why it gets so deep into why she's just such a fucked up person. When she gets back home, this man, Jack, that Judith is marrying, he's not there. He's gone to California to apply for some job. He's a doctor. She gets back and she is absolutely taken aback by how quickly this has progressed, this marriage, and how serious they seem to be about it. She kind of thought, this isn't really going to happen. She didn't really let herself believe it. So when she hears that they've already obtained a marriage license, that they have like actually thought this through, it's so overwhelming to her. It's like sickening. It's this interesting thing where she won't really allow herself to come to terms with why this is so sickening to her. She doesn't speak it or think it, but you know that she knows why. Cassandra thinks about how though the two of them have tried being apart, they've never actually succeeded in it. They are so intricately linked to each other. And she decides because of this that she's actually been invited back for the wedding to rescue her sister, that her sister doesn't want to go through with this, and Cassandra will be the one to make sure that she doesn't have to. There's this really poignant moment that tells you a lot about them as characters and how their identities have been formed around each other or been formed trying not to form around each other. They have picked out the same dress to wear to the wedding. You kind of know this is coming right from the jump because Cassandra talks in the first few pages about how she had gone to buy a dress to wear for the wedding and that it was a beautiful white dress. And then they mention, like, just briefly that they both went to the same store just in different towns. This isn't like hugely unexpected or really shocking. Cassandra has bought a white dress to wear to the wedding. Obviously, there was going to be some sort of problem with that, but they have picked out the exact same dress. And this really fucks with, like, their sense of identity and their sense of self, particularly Cassandra's, because the two of them have fought for their whole lives not to look the same, not to dress the same. It has been such a point of shame, this identical appearance that they have, and having picked out the same dress, not knowing that they had picked out the same dress, seems to like go against everything that they believe about themselves. This dress thing throws Cass into a total spiral, along with everything else about this marriage that she really doesn't want to happen. She ends up getting quite drunk and then getting into a fight with Jude, and then they kind of make up and we see them the next morning. And Cassandra remembers what happened in what you can kind of tell is a way that's probably very different than what actually happened. She does know that she was very drunk, but she remembers talking to Jude and them deciding that Cassandra was going to be the one to go and pick up Jack that afternoon and tell him that the wedding's not going to happen. This is all discussed in very hidden language. Like when Cassandra says, I'm going to go pick up Jack, what she's really saying and what Judith knows she's saying is, I'm calling off the wedding, or you're calling off the wedding. I'm doing it for you. Cassandra is convinced that this is something that Judith has specifically asked her to do, but Judith ends up telling her, these were your ideas, not mine. We both got really drunk. You got carried away. You overwhelmed me. You didn't give me a chance to correct you. I'm not calling off the wedding. I'm going to go pick up Jack on my own. And when Judith leaves to pick up Jack, she doesn't say anything to Cassandra, and this is horrifying. Like, not even getting a goodbye is basically like the most insulting and devastating thing that could happen to Cassandra, because she knows now that the wedding is not going to be called off. So, at the end of Cassandra's chapter, about a third of the way into the book, maybe a little bit over that, she takes a whole bunch of pills and she crawls into bed. Then we switch to the middle section, which is Judith's point of view. She's going to pick up Jack. They meet at the airport. She talks a lot about how overwhelming her sister is, how difficult of a person she is, and how much she still loves her anyway, but how she just wants all of this to be over with. And she says, let's just go get married at City Hall right now. And so they go and do it. And she has a lot of feelings about this. A lot of feelings about disappointing her family. Her grandmother, who they live with, is a very controlling, very traditional kind of woman. Not in a way that is necessarily like abusive or really awful. She's just like kind of annoying about it. You know what I mean? But because the two of them have gone to get married, they get home a lot later than they expect. And when they get home, they find Cassandra's lifeless body. Jack, like I said, is a doctor, and they do manage over the course of the next day to bring her back to life. She does survive this. It's scary for a moment, and we see this all from Judith's perspective as she is trying to like keep this information away from her dad and from her grandmother, as she's panicking about whether or not this was her fault, and on and on. Judith calls Cassandra's doctor, who had prescribed her the sleeping pills that she took. This is her psychiatrist, who she had been seeing ever since Judith had left Cassandra in Berkeley and gone to live in New York for a little bit. Cassandra at least, can't spend time apart from her sister, and she fell into like a really serious depression because of it. This psychiatrist has been mentioned a few times offhand. She ends up flying out and showing up at the house to see Cassandra. This is implicated, I think, to be a relationship that Cassandra is in, which, like, I don't even want to get into the fucking dynamics of that. Like, that is so wildly insane. But there is a thread throughout this book, though it tries in its modern marketing to say this is about a gay woman. It is about a gay woman, but it's not nearly as overt as Cassandra Edwards is a graduate student at Berkeley. Gay, brilliant, nerve-wracked, miserable. It's nothing like that. It is so subtle. But there is something here, some relationship, or maybe just like a mentorship, like maybe her psychiatrist is also a gay woman, but there is some queerness here between the two of them. Once Cassandra wakes up, she ends up okaying the wedding and saying, like, let's do a much bigger thing than you were planning. Let's do what Gran would want, have a wedding at a church with a whole bunch of guests. They plan it in like 12 hours. Everybody shows up. Cass is wearing this same wedding dress as Judith, but it's now from her perspective. And so we don't really see how other people might be responding to this. We don't really know if there are social repercussions for how strange she is, how weird it is that they're both wearing the same wedding dress and they're identical twins. We don't really get that because that's not what Cassandra's thinking about. She's thinking about her sister marrying this man and separating from her. When the officiant says, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," there's a moment where you think Cassandra is going to say something, but she doesn't. She lets it pass. She realizes that saying something is only going to push her further from her sister, that it's not actually going to stop their wedding. Cassandra slips out of the wedding without saying goodbye. She thinks it's just the best way that this can end, and she goes back to Berkeley, where she has this moment on the bridge. She's staring out into the water, and then she leaves the bridge. She's walking back, and her sock is slipping down in her shoe. So she takes the sock off, and she drops it off of the bridge in a way that is symbolic of something. Maybe it's a threat, maybe it's symbolic of change. Like, it does mean something. There are so many things in this book that mean something that it was just a little bit beyond me. I understand that there is more genius in here than I could fully grasp. I am not quite smart enough and not quite well read in older-ish literature to really get everything that was going on. There's also a lot of like subtle allusions to mythology, not something I'm well versed in, but I do know, despite knowing that I missed a lot of things, that this book is very, very, very clever. I think this had such a fascinating exploration of identity by telling that story through these twins who treat being identical as a condition, as something that carries a lot of shame, that also carries a lot of cliches that they're always fighting against, but also that they cannot help but define themselves by. Cass defines herself almost wholly through Judith's eyes, through the way that Judith sees her, through their sameness. Cass doesn't have a strong sense of self. She thinks of herself as only half when Judith is gone. And it manages to have these insightful meditations on selfhood and identity and belonging while not being overly interior. There is a focus on dialogue. And so we get to see, as we need to, a lot of the dynamics between these characters. And I loved the way that Judith and Cass spoke to each other. I think that there was this sharpness and this wit between them. This book is, like I said, it's heavier than the other ones, but it also is funny. Like, Cassandra refuses to call Jack by his name. She calls him Walter Thornton. She calls him George. She calls him the guy. She won't say his name, just as a little way to get those digs in. A little bit of disrespect, making her opinions about what's going on known. And there's a scene right in the beginning where she's talking to Judith on the phone, and she says, "Where's what's his name?" "What's whose name?" I got back, just as audibly. "My turn." "Oh, you know," I said, "George, the sorcerer's apprentice." I had not intended to say anything like this. It just happened, and it created a silence on the other end. "Jude," I said, "are you still there?" "I'm not quite sure," she said. "Should I be?" I love that. I don't know how to describe what I love about that. That is really, like, telling of how they talk throughout this whole book, and there is a lot of, like, things said between the lines between the two of them, but it's easy to understand still, and there's a lot of humor, and there's a lot of emotion as well. I think the perspective shifting is really interesting, to see things from Cassandra's perspective and then go to Jude, who is the only person in this book who's really not acting out of self-interest. It's like her and her fiance are the normal people here, and they are trying to hold everything together. And it becomes quite devastating when you get to see things from her perspective, because you've really just been thinking in terms of how Cassandra is feeling, but Judith has so much on her plate. Also including the fact that she has, like, a really kind of, like, annoying grandmother and father. Like, everyone in her life is very eccentric. Her grandma is this very rich woman, and who kind of pays for things to be the way she wants them to be. She has a lot of really strong opinions. She's very traditional, and she's also very sneaky about it. Like, she wants a really specific kind of wedding. She lets her opinion be known about that, and then in secret invites her friends over to the house for the wedding before it's planned to be this big thing. There's also the dad who is this ex-philosophy professor, and all he ever wants to talk about is philosophy. He's like so annoying. If you're looking for a book that is like really overtly queer, you're not going to find it in this. It was published in 1962, so you probably shouldn't expect to find it in this. It does have a really interesting, subtle exploration of queerness. There's this thing where Cassandra tries to end her life, and it uses that as an allegory for being gay, for being something that is unacceptable, that's a sin, that's unexpected. She talks about how she slips into the black velvet of death, basically, and then that becomes marrying the black velvet. And it very interestingly links these two things going on with her, these two urges that she has to die and also to be with a woman. My main problem with this book is not a problem with this book, it's a problem with the modern marketing. I wish that it hadn't tried to sell it as something that was gay. I mean, it is, absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's subtle or overt. It still is gay, and it is about a gay woman. But I would have liked to come to that realization on my own. I think that it's kind of funny in the way that it talks about it in this 1960s way, where it'll say things like companions or girl buddies. It literally says girl buddies at one point. It does not ever get really deep into it. It will be like very offhand mentions of woman companions, and that's it. And then we get this allegorical thing. I think that would have been far more interesting to read if this wasn't trying to shout from the rooftops that it's about a gay woman, because now that's marketable. I think that's lame. I think it's annoying. That's really like the main problem that I had with this book. Otherwise, it's just that I'm not smart enough to get it, but that's on me, and I can still recognize that this is great. Sometimes you read a book that you're not smart enough for, and you're like, okay, that all went over my head and I got no enjoyment from it whatsoever. This is nothing like that. You can still get so much from this. It is just so well written that it's hard not to enjoy it, even if it might be beyond you. Though it can be a little bit difficult at times because it is very claustrophobic. It's suffocating. It is so isolated being in Cassandra's head for most of this book. And then it's just kind of devastating to see the impact this has had on Judith, who's really just like trying her fucking best. Overall, I think that this was just a great book. It made me laugh. It made me feel sad. It made me think. And I enjoyed every single sentence in it. I think it was extraordinarily well written, and I would highly recommend it. I'm going to read one more book, Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fado, something like that. But I'm going to read this on the Patreon. So if you want to see my thoughts about this, hop on over there. Link in bio. That is the end of this video. I thank you very much for watching this. Don't know why I would ever say it like that. This was fun, and I'm getting out of here. I have nothing more to say. Goodbye.